The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
And then you just want your story to be its most clear, like there's one problem in the story, right? There's not like all these extra, things and points that might want to come in, but there's just the one story problem that you're going after, and, beginning, middle, and end, and not getting bogged down in the details.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Carolyn at Leiloglou writes books for children. Her picture book, Library's Most Wanted, was a 2021 Willa Award finalist. She was also a 2018 finalist for the Catherine Patterson Prize. Her poems and stories have been published in magazines around the world, including Highlights, Ladybug, and the School magazine in Australia. She's also part of the Habit membership, where she generously answers her colleagues' questions about publishing and picture books. Carolyn at Leiloglou, I'm so glad that you are on the Habit Podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on here.
As I was looking at your various publications, I was just my mind was blown when I saw that you've been published in a publication that I've been reading. Maybe I shouldn't say I have been reading, but I read before I read any other publication just about, and that was Highlights magazine.
Yes. Yeah. The tricky thing with Highlights is a lot of us say it's easier to get a picture book published than to be in Highlights sometimes. So I was very honored to have gotten a story in there.
Do they still do Goofus and Gallant?
They do. Yeah. I think they actually have it online now. No, no, I did not get to meet them.
I want to know what are they like in real life? Goofus and Gallant was always my favorite thing in Highlights magazine. That's great. So not too long ago, you published a book called Library's Most Wanted.
Yes.
About a little girl named Libby, who is a deputy librarian, and takes her job a little too seriously.
Yes.
You had mentioned to me just a little while ago that you didn't go to libraries too much as a child.
Yeah, I didn't really. We went to the school library. My mom mainly would take us to bookstores. That's how I got most of my books, but we didn't really grow up going to the library. So I kind of discovered how wonderful libraries were as an adult, kind of after I had kids and was just roaming the aisles with my kids looking for books that we would enjoy together. So
yeah,
that's when I came to love it.
Yeah, right. So the protagonist of A Library is Most Wanted, as I said a minute ago, Libby, she takes her job just a little too seriously. I love characters who take their job too seriously.
Yeah.
Hank the Cowdog and Barney Fife, people like that. And so you've got your character's a little bit like that.
Yeah. Well, so the whole idea for the book, like a lot of my picture book ideas, kind of started out with like the interesting title and concept, Libraries Most Wanted. What would, if there were to be wanted posters in a library, like why would there be, and what would those be about? And I really agree with C.S. Lewis when his talk about or his essay about writing for children. He says you shouldn't go in with like, what moral do children need to hear? Instead, you should either say, what do I need to hear? Or let the moral develop naturally. And I do feel like there's a moral to my story, but it is something that developed naturally because I started off with these ideas like what would be the bad things, right? That would go on these wanted posters, like ripping a page or losing a book, like things that we had done. But I realized like, well, that's not what I want this story to be about. Like, I don't want kids to be afraid of the library. And, that's not really the purpose of a librarian, is to make sure the books are protected.
Yeah, right.
Really, the purpose is connecting books with readers. And so what I had to do is, allow Libby to start off in that very super serious, like, I got to protect these books from everybody. And then find a natural way for her to come around and realize, oh, I'm not doing my job right. Like, this is not what a library is about. And kind of, because I feel like, libraries have that like stereotype, especially in a lot of like movies and stuff like, shh, you have to be quiet. You have to be on your best behavior. And it can, I think, make things feel a little bit intimidating. For kids. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to touch the books on the book display, like what's allowed in here and what isn't. And so I just wanted to make it seem more inviting, like, hey, you really do belong here. Like, if you love books, come on in. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. Are people allowed to touch the books on the book display?
Yes, I was so intimidated as a child and even as an adult when I started taking my kids and the librarians had put up these, displays and like, but that's because they're like, hey, this book is awesome. Like, you should check it out.
Yeah, right.
It's not just to like, be venerated or something.
Yeah, right. I love the idea that, there's a very real way that when you take a thing too seriously, you are getting the thing wrong. And so, I guess maybe we should explain your point. We're talking about this because Libby is working so hard to bust the kids who chew the pages or dog ear the pages or whatever, that the kids stop coming around.
Exactly.
And then a tumbleweed comes through the library, which I think is pretty funny.
That's my favorite page spread.
Yeah, right. It's great.
Yeah.
Because it also has a Western theme, right? This story, that Libby wears cowboy boots and maybe a little vest, or doesn't she wear some sort of, I can't remember if she wears a vest. She wears what? No, she wears a little flannel shirt.
Yeah.
So in the course of taking her job so seriously, she doesn't do her job well at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which might have some relevance for writers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I know. I definitely think so. Yeah, you talked to me a little bit about this earlier. It was if I had told you I'm a rule follower, just like Libby, right? Yeah. and it definitely, I think, has an impact on how I go about writing, and sometimes a negative impact on it, because I feel like I have to figure out what all the rules are before I can do this right. Like there's probably one more class I need to take, and I probably, I'm doing this wrong. And it's with writing, there are rules, but then again, a lot of those rules are meant to be broken, right? Like if you know what the rules are, like about how to write a sentence, for example, there's times when you're going to, for emphasis, just, use one noun as the sentence. And that's technically breaking a rule, right? But there's times when that's appropriate. So same thing with like writing with like story structure, for example. I took a class last year. It was a wonderful class from Mary Rosewood, and it was about the hero's journey.
Yeah.
But I feel like in some ways it kind of roadblocked me because I'm like, well, does my story fit the hero's journey? I don't know if I can like match all the stages up. And really that's, a good story is going to fit most of that, but looking at it in a prescriptive way wasn't helpful for me. I'm sure it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't helpful for me because I'm such a rule follower, like I feel like I have to get it exactly right if there's a format.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Most of the rules about writing that I know are more helpful after the fact. Like something's not working, what's not working about this, and it might help you diagnose what's wrong, but it's not usually helpful to say, okay, going into this sentence, I've got to make sure the subject and verb are pretty close to each other, and I got to make sure, I don't end with a preposition or whatever. Well, the preposition, that rule is not very helpful, period. But
no.
but as I said, as a way of figuring out what's wrong, not as a way of you talked about the difference between prescriptive and well, you didn't contrast to another word, but to say something like Freytag's pyramid is really only helpful if your story doesn't follow Freytag's pyramid and it works. Good on you. I'm not going to come hunt you down to find out why you didn't match it up with Freytag's pyramid.
Right.
So you may have already answered this question, but I wanted to give you a chance to say anything else about it. How has being a rule follower, how has that helped you as a writer?
That's a good question. And I'm not sure I have as much of an answer for it. I think that it has, just as like too many classes and like getting bogged down with all of that is negative. It is good to educate yourself, and you do need to know some stuff going in, or you're going to end up with like a 3,000 word picture book, which no one's going to buy. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Or, it does help to know like what the conventions are and what the best practices are. So I think it's, as long as you're balancing, right? That's the hard thing for any of us, is to find balance. But I think it can be good too.
Yeah. I think in terms of rules, it is helpful to, I think, fill up your toolbox or your tool belt or whatever metaphor we're going to use, not with the expectation to use all these rules and tools and tips and tricks, but knowing when something doesn't work, I've got these options for trying what does work.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Which is the spirit of the rule follower is, I want to know the one right way to do this, and if you can get pushed past this is the one way to do this and to here's one way to do it. I think that the tendency to be the desire to know the rules can be really helpful if you've just got a wide collection of rules and what works and what doesn't. Especially given the fact that what works today may or may not work next week or next year.
Absolutely. Like if you're only reading the classics, which are wonderful, then you're not going to be able to write something that is going to get published today, right? Because the way that we write has changed so much. Like we've gotten tighter and shorter and sparser with descriptions, and we're thinking about different ways of making our manuscripts work than they were back then.
Yeah. Did you have to reach a point where you got over yourself in terms of loving the classics? And a lot of people love the classics, and I have been this person at some point in my life. Loved the classics and thought, boy, we've really gone to the dogs since Charles Dickens was writing or whatever, and had to get over that and think, okay, I'm glad Charles Dickens did what he did, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think less so because I'm a children's writer and because I love reading children's literature. Like I went to Biola and did the Torrey program, and we basically just read the classics, and it was phenomenal. But because my focus has been children's literature, there's fewer of those older books. Like a lot of, most books even that I grew up with, right, would not necessarily be considered in that same time frame, not the classics. So, so yeah, I don't think I had that struggle quite as much. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some really old children's books that you like?
Really old.
Let me say, how far back can you go for children's books that you really love?
That I really love. That I like, Alice in Wonderland, and I like George MacDonald a lot. I don't know that I love At the Back of the North Wind, but that one gets a little meandering sometimes. Yeah, right. But I grew up on Chronicles of Narnia and Madeleine L'Engle, and but those were, their lifetimes overlapped with mine, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or I don't know about this, but almost.
How about what about Beatrix Potter? You like Beatrix Potter?
I do. I grew up with those as well, but that's definitely a different type of storytelling. Yeah,
right. Wind in the Willows. You like Wind in the Willows?
I do. Yeah. See, you're thinking of all the ones that I'm forgetting.
So you have operated a book review site, House Full of Bookworms, for how long have you been doing that?
I started in 2014, so it's been a bit. Yeah. And a lot of that just came from the fact that I, as an adult, still really enjoyed reading and revisiting children's books, both ones that I had read, as a child, and then new ones. And I found that, a lot of my friends didn't necessarily enjoy doing that, didn't necessarily enjoy like pre-reading for their kids or whatever. And I thought, well, this would be like a great service to offer people. And then at the same time, I knew that I was pursuing writing at that time. And, of course, you don't know for sure if you'll ever get published unless you decide to publish yourself. But like that wasn't something on my radar. And so I did have it in mind that like, hey, maybe someday like I'm going to have books as well to tell people about on here. So,
yeah. So what are some things you learned about writing for these are all books for children that you review at House Full of Bookworms? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some things you've learned about writing for children from operating that website?
Yeah. The things I've learned definitely aren't in the rules category for sure. It's more I've learned what I like. I've probably been able to pick up on voice, been able to tell like what works, and especially in picture books, like what works in a picture book, like what really makes a good picture book. And a lot of times that's a combination of like heart and humor. They're not always humor, but it definitely helps to have something funny, to have something in there that that maybe the kids aren't going to pick up on, but make it more interesting for the adults. Some of the humor in there, or wordplay, and then just that voice of like consolidating a story down to about 500 words. I learned that through writing also, but like through reading a lot of picture books, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do you? Is it the sort of thing that you have some tips or whatever for condensing things down to such a short amount of space?
So with picture books, one thing to keep in mind is the half of the story is meant to be in the art. So you're not looking to describe things. You're not saying Libby was wearing a denim shirt and she had boots on and pigtails and she has red hair. Like it's just like Libby was doing that, right? And the illustrator is the one who actually gets to decide that because they're a co-storyteller with you. Yeah. So that definitely helps cut down on the words. And then you just want your story to be its most clear, like there's one problem in the story, right? There's not like all these extra, things and points that might want to come in, but there's just the one story problem that you're going after, and beginning, middle, and end, and not getting bogged down in the details.
No, that's a great point about the letting the illustrator do the describing for you. It's really about movement. You're talking about moving from point A to point B.
Absolutely. And, as the author, you should be thinking about, and as you say, movement, like, is there going to be a way for the illustrator to draw something new on the next page? Or is everyone like just a talking head? That's not going to work as a picture book because there won't be anything to draw. So,
can you say just a little bit more about that? I mean, when you say you're giving the illustrator something to draw on the next page, any more you can say about that?
Yeah, I mean, that can work different ways. It could work with, you're introducing new possibilities for action or new location, or not sure I can like practically, I'm not sure.
Like the wanted posters, I like
as an
that
example.
Idea. What's that?
The wanted posters, for example, in my picture book, what's fantastic is the captions on the wanted posters. The illustrator actually came up with those.
Oh, really?
Like, I didn't dictate those at all. Yeah. And she did a great job. Yeah. Like they're hinted at what's on them, but like she was the one who actually came up with that. And the tumbleweed rolling through when I say the library, the children's section is Ghost Town Quiet. She's the one, she came up with that tumbleweed. And
that's funny.
Yeah.
That's great because
it makes something more than you could have made on your own.
Yeah. And she's a person who thinks visually, and I mean, hopefully you think visually too, but probably not quite as visually as she does. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're working on something new. Tell me about what else you've been working on lately.
I am. I've got a novel on submission right now, and it looks hopeful. So it's a contemporary middle grade fantasy where art is magic, pictures are portals, and one family has been tasked with protecting them.
Yeah. Is that all you got to say about that?
That's the pitch right now. Yeah, I can't say much more. I can't. My agent said not even to say the title because that could change. But yeah, it looks promising right now. So
good.
That would hopefully be out in a couple of years. So
yeah. Well, I'm so glad to hear it. Well, I want you to tell me something else that you are probably expecting this question. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
There's a ton, but I'll narrow it down to two. Andrew Peterson's Wing Feather Saga series. I love how he created a world and just imbued it with so much meaning, and the character relationships. That world has always really inspired me. And then Cassie Beasley, she wrote Circus Mirandus and the Bootlace Magician, and the way she brings fantastical elements into the real world, and just weaves in so much meaning. I just love her books. Yeah.
Does she write novels?
Yes, middle grade novels.
Maybe you just said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
Well, and the Wing Feather books. I like the way you talk about this world that feels so full and overfull. I love the footnotes in that, that give the feeling that there's so much more going on than is making it into the story. That's such a clever trick on Andrew's part to include those footnotes. And
my kids especially love the footnotes.
Yeah. And these little sort of off the cuff remarks that he doesn't come back to, that feel like, there's something. And of course that was a big part of the Wing Feather Tales collection that he got his friends to do.
I was just thinking that like he left enough open for other people to explore. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, I need to check out Cassie Miranda is the name of that.
Circus Mirandus is her book, but it's Cassie Beasley. Maybe I misspoke. Cassie Beasley, and it's Circus Mirandus and the Bootlace Magician is the follow-up.
Okay,
she's fantastic.
Well, I'm gonna check that out. Great. Well, I look forward to seeing your new novel too soon. I
Yes, Lord willing.
hope. Well, thank you, Carolyn Leiloglou, for being here.
Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate. Special thanks as well to Taylor Linhart for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for Season 3 of the Habit podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorlinhart.com.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.